this government's legacy. So it is of vital importance, and of course it has so many different connotations when viewed from different perspectives. And what we've tried to do today is to bring together some of the finest minds representing diverse opinions so we can have a constructive debate on a subject that is close to our hearts and has been in the news for a variety of reasons. So I think we've already been introduced to the entire panel. So let me begin with Mr. Salman Khurshid. Mr. Khurshid, two decisions by this government with regards to Kashmir, one on Article 370 and the concomitant that flows from it, 35A, excited a lot of commentary around the world and of course here in India. Opinions are divided. The government feels that it's been hard done by some of the criticism. What's your view?
Well, to be very clear, this is one of the areas in which anything that you say which is not compatible with what the government has done is treated in a manner which is a little worrisome. It's misunderstood very easily. It's projected in a way that makes it sound as though you're against a national imperative. So whatever has to be said very carefully. And I know that my party has said that we have no problem with what you have done, but we have a problem with how you've done it. So there's no point in my just repeating what my party has said, but to say something that I believe is the essence of what's happened. Everyone accepts that 370 was a temporary provision of the Constitution. We don't want to go into the constitutional complications because the Supreme Court will decide that. But critically, 370 reflected an aspiration, an attempt, and an endeavor to ensure that Kashmir psychologically, physically, spiritually remains connected with the idea of India. That was the purpose. And I believe that that purpose wasn't entirely achieved for a variety of reasons, but that purpose will be achieved by abrogation of 370, I think is a very wild imagination. It's going to have the adverse impact. Now, I would say that you want to remove 370 because you are committed ideologically, etc., and you believe that that's a good thing to do. Fair enough. But you haven't given us the alternative as to how Kashmir would get integrated in the manner in which it should. And integration does not mean obliteration of their aspirations, but integration in the most wholesome sense. And that's what I feel. I believe that it hasn't been thought out through, and that there are implications and possible events in the future that would be very regressive and, in fact, would be completely opposite to the purpose for which it's been statedly to be done.
Mr. Mishra, many people say that the provision was already hollowed out by several interventions that began in the late 50s, in fact, and early 60s. So we already only had a shell of the original legislation, and therefore it was creating a false sense of separatism. That's what the government says.
I agree. That's one of the reasons our party, the Biju Janata Dal, wholeheartedly supported the government on the move. I think it was a move we felt which was long overdue because it wasn't allowing many of the laws passed by Parliament to play out. It's in its full amplitude in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and a lot of the people were being bereft of the benefits of many of these pieces of legislation, which are welfare legislations. But be that as it may, I think I agree with Salman on one thing, that this government is extraordinary as far as the very large brushstrokes are concerned. There's no question about it. And the grand announcements, they operate on a very wide canvas, and it appears exceptionally grand. The problem is with the fine brushwork. The fine brushwork is, I think, what is lacking. We supported the government in its entirety, but we are still waiting to see whether the government now has a sequitur plan in place. There should have been a sequitur plan in place. They should have known that there will be a blowback. They should have known that there are going to be emotional repercussions in Kashmir. And we are still waiting to see that play out. Because at the moment, as far as we can see, there is just peace being maintained there with a very, very heavy presence of our forces there. I don't know how long that can carry on. I believe that at some point, people have to go out and start working. People have to meet their daily needs. And I think that's not happening. I meet a lot of people who come to Delhi from Kashmir, and they're coming back with stories of substantial privations, may I say, because people's lives are not normal. People are not able to do their day-to-day work just to earn a basic, decent living. And that's very problematic, I think, as far as I'm concerned, apart from the civil liberties angle, which, of course, is something that should concern all Indians.
It's an interesting point of view, Mr. Jayapanda, because it sums up a lot of criticism that India has sort of received in the international press. Some people have used the phrase, a living hell. That's what Kashmir has become. The government, the Union Home Minister made a statement the other day saying, look, normalcy is back. All restrictions are lifted. This is all fake propaganda. There are sympathizers of the Pakistani establishment that are terrorizing people not to open shops and go about their daily lives. Attendance in exam centers is chock-a-block. Schools are open. You know the whole litany of expressions he used to convey a sense of normalcy. So where does the truth really lie? Are we stuck between the propaganda hard place and the deep blue sea of our own undoing in Kashmir?
In a lighter vein, just pointing out that the BJP member of the panel was the only one not given a microphone to begin with and had to borrow one. Tells you something about how we have to struggle to get our point across. But this is an emotive issue, and all I request is that we deal with it sensitively and have an open mind to hearing all sides. Now, Article 370 was not just a temporary article. It was the only article in the Constitution, the only one, with the word temporary in front of it. Now, let us remember that what is happening today is an unfinished part of the process that happened when we got independence and partition. We had these kind of restraints put in many places across the subcontinent, in the Punjab, in Delhi, in Rajasthan, in Assam, in West Bengal, and nobody protested for a single reason, is that it was hugely traumatic. Large numbers of people actually died, and these measures were felt necessary to contain the violence. Now, if these restraints had been put in place in Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh in 1947, the same attitudes would have applied as to all these other places. For whatever reason, let's understand that the accession of Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh to India was by the exact same process, the exact same instrument of accession wordings as all the other princely states to either India or to Pakistan. Now, for whatever reason, it was felt necessary to have a temporary phase of integrating the state. Now we know for a fact that what happened in the previous decades was not normal. If you talk about lack of normalcy today, what happened for the last at least 3 decades was not normal. So you must compare to what the situation was and what the effort is to change it to. Let me say a few things more. From August 5th onwards, we had a choice that if this was to be done, and everybody says that it needed to be done, the dispute is about how, why, etc. I think Salman is very erudite in placing his party's point of view, but unfortunately, some people have said rash things which have been used by our opponents internationally. It's been used by terrorists, have been used by Pakistan. But the kind of changes that have happened over the last 3.5 months. Within 24 hours after August 5th, the movement of people was not restrained. You could see that in the videos, traffic moving. Gradually, over these past months, the landlines were first restored, mobiles have been restored. Yes, internet is a vital necessity, as the Home Minister pointed out in Parliament, but we have this stark choice of either putting some temporary restraints in place or having permanent losses of lives, which could be on a large scale. Let us remember, not a single civilian life has been lost due to police firing in law and order situations in the last 3.5 months. Yes, there are political leaders in detention, and this is a phase which we will overcome. One of the things that is going to happen is that because of local elections to the panchayats and to the block development councils, you have a whole new generation of actively engaged people, social workers and politicians coming in. So there will not be any vacuum in the political space in the medium term. Now, the restraints will be removed gradually. There have been a lot of removal of restraints. Only about 1% of the police stations have any kind of restraints there. There is no restraints on the general population. There are restraints on political activity because of this transition period. This is a transition period. It will change, and all steps are being taken to ensure that the difficulties are minimized. Schools have reopened, as you have heard recently. The Union government is committed to making the kind of investments and development in Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, which it missed out on for all these 7 decades that we tried with the earlier paradigm. And we must think about justice for all. Many laws, 106 laws passed by the Indian Parliament and rulings of the Supreme Court did not apply in Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, having to do with the rights of LGBTQ community, having to do with the rights of Dalits, having to do with the Right to Information Act, and so many others. So all I would say is that if you see this as an unfinished part of independence and partition, as I see it, then it is reasonable that although we have difficulties, we will overcome them in the coming months.
Thank you for lending your voice to this mic and giving it back to me so I can be, in some ways or the other, the carrier of this torch. But look, I like what you've just said, only because you've sort of stated the facts, but there is a bit of a problem. And this is pointed out by the opposition continually. And they say that, look, a fundamental right, the right to communication, is blocked because there is no access to internet, which is a fundamental right. I'll go down, and then I think it's about the means that were adopted to achieve the end. Now, people say there have been detentions. 10 seconds? 10 seconds, okay, 10 seconds.
The right to life is more fundamental than the right to communication.
Okay. Suchna versus Suraksha. Okay, summed it up. But the means that were adopted, many people say, look, you've got politicians in confinement, individuals who were on the side, so to speak, the mainstream, the Indian state. They're today alienated. But many people would say that they're paying for the lack of restraint they've shown. And they were instigating. And this conversation about the articles concerned have been going on for decades. So why is everyone sort of talking about the fact that there has been no consultation?
Thank you, Rahul. On a lighter note again, not only was I not given a mic, the mic I took was taken away. So I borrowed it. But we are allies, so I suppose something has to be common. No, Rahul, let me say this to you. Article 370 has now been done. The Constitution stands amended. The article has been abrogated. But in Parliament, my party, the JDU, voted against it because we believe the manner in which it was done was, if not in letter, but in spirit, a violation of the Constitution. Article 3 of the Constitution specifically and categorically states that you cannot create a new state, alter its boundaries, change its name, or do anything with regard to an existing state without the express consultation and concurrence of the state concerned. Article 370 itself also incorporates an element of consultation with the state. Now you may have obviated this through a technical, legal and technical maneuver, but the fact of the matter is that the spirit of the Constitution in terms of consultation with people who are citizens of India was not done. That's point number one. Secondly, I don't believe that this causal connection can be made. That all the militancy and instability in Jammu Kashmir over the last few decades was entirely due to the fact that Article 370 had not been abrogated. It was at many levels, the causes were many, the blunders made by many governments, not only this and in the past, were many. By hindsight, we can think of what we could have done better. We also had the problem of a neighbor like Pakistan, which exports terrorism. There were many issues there, so the belief that the abrogation of Article 370 is a magic wand and Jammu and Kashmir with its abrogation will come back to normalcy as a happily integrated part of India is, I think, not true. Secondly, if you say something in terms of even a constructive critique of the government, there is a tendency today, as Jay referred to, which I violently disagree with. We are a mature democracy. There will be debate in this country. You have one point of view, I may have another point of view. But there was a tendency in the last few months where if you were made even a constructive critique of what you've done or what the government has done, you were either anti-national or proxies of Pakistan, or you were spreading fake news. Now, I believe that this kind of argument is a demeaning and devaluation of what India is, which is it's a vibrant democracy, and that is why we are not Pakistan. And therefore, that freedom should be allowed. Lastly, I want to say, Chanakya used to say, as said in Arthashastra, that never go into a place where you don't know how to get out. And there is a question today of having abrogated Article 370, how the government wishes to restore normalcy, prosperity, happiness and integration in Jammu Kashmir. What we see today and the steps that Jay has described as normalcy or a return to normalcy, in my view, is a frozen peace. It is not normalcy. And I believe strongly that the arrest of leaders who are of mainstream political parties and were till the other day your own allies in government, to arrest them for now months and to believe that that normalcy has returned. Some of their cadre and people, even if they may have made rash statements, fought with you against terrorists. They lost lives against you. So I think an embrace to democracy, the return of normalcy, is the only real antidote to what is happening today in Jammu Kashmir.
Now, I'm very glad that you stressed the word democracy, but some of these individuals also, of course, boycotted parliamentary elections. And I don't know, you referred to a state, a neighboring state, Pakistan, and if we were Pakistan, we wouldn't have discussed this and passed this as a bill through parliament. That represents the will of the people, does it not?
No, of course we passed it through parliament.
Well then,
I said to you, it's not that we've become a tin pot democracy.
every one of you had a voice.
But I believe that
You had a vote.
Yeah, we had a vote, we had a voice, but the spirit of the Constitution, which sought for consultations with the duly elected State Assembly of the state, was obviated by legal and technical means.
Okay.
And the people of Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir, as a consequence of that, are hurt, alienated, angry, and bruised.
Just to state the facts, there were more than 50 interventions to dilute Article 370 that never went through Parliament. So when the abrogation did take place, it did happen through the writ of parliament. There was a debate. Everyone was invited. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the BJP did make this a vital mention of this in their manifesto, that they would do it. So it was not a secret. They were elected to do it. But I don't want to intercede on behalf of Mr. Kapil Sibal. Mr. Kapil Sibal, the question now is, Kamal Sibal, sorry, the question now is, sorry, terribly sorry. There are two questions here. If Kashmir is normal, why are leaders in detention? And secondly, why weren't they consulted? Was that a mistake?
Well, before I answer your question, let's imagine for a moment that Jammu and Kashmir was not a border state. It didn't have Pakistan as its contiguous territory. Pakistan had no territorial claims on Kashmir. They had not gone to the international community repeatedly to raise this issue and accuse India of human rights violations, etc., use the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, to ratchet up opinion in the Muslim world against India. And of course, then the use of terrorism for more than a couple of decades to keep the situation unstable. Secondly, imagine for a moment that Jammu and Kashmir was not a Muslim majority state, and especially if the valley was not almost 100% or 98% Muslim majority. Would these problems have arisen? Now, if the answer is these problems would not have arisen, then you have to focus on why they have arisen and why they have lingered on and why the Indian government has found it very difficult over the years to deal with the situation, because there is a very powerful external dimension. There is the Chinese dimension, which we are not talking about, apart from the fact that they're occupying large parts of Jammu and Kashmir. But they have been supporting Pakistan on terrorism, as we have seen. And not only that, they are, as we have seen in the UN committee, in the United Nations, they have maneuvered to bring the issue back after so many years to the United Nations Security Council in order to internationalize this. So we've had a very serious external challenge in Jammu and Kashmir, and now with the prospect of the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan and radicalization and everything else gaining further depth in this area with its repercussions in Jammu and Kashmir, we have an additional problem. So that is why, apart from the fact that the BJP had this in its manifesto, the ambient situations, the developments around us made it imperative that we do something. Secondly, Jammu and Kashmir had autonomy. What did they use this autonomy for? To destroy the Sufi traditions? To have Ali Hadith come and radicalize the valley? Give support to terrorism, to the separatists? Each time something happened, shut down shutters. If the security forces are operating, have the villagers gathered around and interfere in the imposition of law and order and the anti-terror operations, etc., etc. Instead of doing this, what they could have done was to have slowly moved the territory to become more in tune with a secular Indian democracy. If that evolution had taken place, there would have been no reason to do what we are doing now. But just the opposite has happened. Apart from the external anger, internally we've seen that the Indian state has been challenged in terms of its secular foundations. It's very surprising that the secular lobby keeps accusing the government of being anti-secular, but they don't actually focus on the fact how the Kashmiris, the Muslim Kashmiris, had actually tried to destroy the secular credentials of this country by the kind of evolution that has taken place in their own. Fourthly, look at what's happened in Tibet and in Xinjiang and in Pakistan itself, where religious places have been destroyed, demographic changes have taken place, the Han language has been imposed, any sign of any proclivity towards faith, Muslim faith in Xinjiang, millions have been put into re-education centers. In Pakistan, what did they do in Swat and North and South Waziristan? They used heavy artillery, tanks and this and that to destroy the opponents and make 1 million people internal refugees. Have we done anything of the kind in Jammu and Kashmir? Why haven't the Kashmiri leadership taken note of the fact that their future lies with India? In fact, they are far more protected by Indian democracy than any of the neighboring Muslim populations around them. Insofar as incarceration is concerned, for how many? You would know, 18 years, Sheikh Abdullah, who was the one who who was principally responsible for, if you like, Kashmir joining India for 18 years. He was in detention. So why for a few weeks these fellows are in detention? We are saying our democracy is in peril, and we are sort of, we have tears in our eyes, and we are attacking our own system and this and that. And we should have a rational view of things. Finally, this is a very difficult situation. The government dealing with the situation are not fools. Can you imagine people sitting around and they're not taking cognizance of all the things that have been mentioned around here about the difficulties in dealing with the situation in the future, the prospects of dissatisfaction coming out in the streets, and then police firing takes place, and then the human rights violations angle, the international press is against us. Some of these busybodies in the United States and the Scandinavian countries are attacking us. Huh?
You believe that? The international press is against us?
Yes, the liberal press is against us, definitely. I mean, the liberal press, which actually conditions thinking in the English world, definitely is against us. So they have taken all this into consideration, but when vital national interests are at stake, the government has to act, the government has to govern. They are not going to be moved away from compromising. They can't compromise their national interests simply because New York Times writes an editorial. So I think the government is on the right track, but this doesn't mean that there are no problems down the road, but we will deal with those problems. And at the end of the day, Indian democracy will become stronger by the action that we have taken, and our capacity will increase to deal with the external challenges.
Kamal Sibbal's made some important points. Mr. Mattu, would you like to respond to them?
Let me begin by saying what you began your statement by saying, that we are not living in a Talibanized Pakistan or a communist dictatorship like the one that exists in China. I believe that we are living in a robust, vibrant, multicultural, plural democracy. And one of the great strengths of that democracy is that you can have debates like this one, and that your expectations from your government are going to be higher than the people who live in Balochistan or Xinjiang or even Beijing or Islamabad or Hong Kong, as Mr. Sibal points out. And it's in that spirit that we should conduct this discussion, because we have expectations. As Indian citizens, we have those expectations from our government. Let me say that the act of the abrogation of 370 did not surprise me. Ever since 1953, 23rd of June, when Shyama Prasad Mukherjee died in mysterious circumstances in Kashmir, the abrogation of 370 has been on the charter of the Jan Sangh and its successor, the BJP, for the last 66 years. Article 370 also had lost most of its potency, and no matter what Khurshid Saab and others might say, much of the dilution happened during Congress governments in collusion with state leaders. However, I believe that the real test of any integration, the real test of any process of acceptance of that integration will have to be in the streets of Srinagar, Jammu and Leh. You will decide, they will decide, they are the real stakeholders, whether their lives, as the Government of India has pointed out, will be much better, that they will feel more empowered, and that there will be greater peace and prosperity in Jammu and Kashmir as a consequence of the abrogation of 370. The jury there is still out. And I agree with almost all the panelists, including Mr. Pawan Verma, the fact that you didn't consult with the leadership of Jammu and Kashmir. Tell me, in all honesty, on this dais and elsewhere, Farooq Abdullah, who a few months ago, in a memorial meeting for Atal Bihari Vajpayee, says, Bharat Mata ki Jai, repeatedly, and gets all parliamentarians to echo that, how difficult would it have been to convince him if Jai Panda and his fellow members of parliament had gone and said, Farooq Saab, you understand this is the national interest, this is what we are facing, this is the kind of geopolitics where the Taliban are taking over Afghanistan, you can't imagine the fury of radicalism that will spread. That's something which I can't figure out. Once you ignored the mainstream leadership, you created a situation where it's not going to be easy to restore normalcy. I think normalcy will come, but you will have to wait much longer than if you had if you had consulted with and given them ownership for the decisions that you took in Delhi. Otherwise, at the moment, it seems that Delhi decided and Srinagar, Jammu, and Leh have to accept. And remember, the concerns about the Article 35A, there are similar concerns in Jammu about domicile status, about jobs. These concerns are not limited to just the Valley of Kashmir. There are genuine concerns in Jammu as well. So ultimately, I would like to see statehood being restored to Jammu and Kashmir. And also remember that there are domicile rules which exist in the Northeast. 371A to E5 gives special rights. I can't buy property in Himachal Pradesh with the same ease that I can buy property in Delhi. These are genuine concerns, and the flexibility and the genius of the Indian Constitution and Ambedkar and others who drafted it was in understanding that there's not one single brush that can paint every picture. Thank you.
Two quick rebuttals coming in, one from Mr. Panda and one from Mr. Sibal.
Again, on a lighter note, although the BJD is not an ally, keeps helping us out with giving us a voice, whereas the JDU is an ally, we often have to struggle to carry them. But a quick...
You have to deal with your allies better.
Just a quick response. Now, Amitabh was talking about consultation. The reality is, in our parliamentary system, the consultation of the people is what leads to parliament being elected and deciding. In other countries with a parliamentary system, such as the UK, which have tried to have direct referendums with people's consultation, you see what kind of a situation they have. Now, secondly, just a few weeks before August 5th, all these parties voted in parliament to extend president's rule because there was no majority in the assembly in Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, and it specifically states that the governor's consent will be taken for constitutional change. It has followed, comma, full stop of the constitutional requirements for making changes to Article 370, including all the precedents over the last 70 years. So nothing has been done in a manner that you're trying to project it as. I would only say this. The former governor, Satyapal Malik ji, pointed out the discovery of large scams in the political system. And this should be of concern to us, and this was undermining the democratic process in Kashmir. Now, you referred to Farooq Abdullah ji. I've served with him in parliament, and indeed, he has often worked for the national interest. But on this particular interest, he had gone public and said there would be mayhem if this was done, and something which almost everybody in parliament with a huge majority voted for. There has been no mayhem. Now, look, there has been no mayhem, and that is why we will gradually restore normalcy. The last thing I will say is this. Please, you're a Kashmiri. Ask the people of Jammu and Kashmir what is their opinion of the local political leadership. Please share with us.
No, I agree with you that there was a sense of entitlement of the political leadership. And the entitlement came not only because of what they did, but because Delhi gave them the patronage that they often didn't deserve. Now, in terms of just Farooq Abdullah, who we all respect and regard for his great service to the nation, including, I remember a time when Salman Saab and Farooq Abdullah and other leaders who went to Geneva to defend the Indian national interest, is someone who is not known for his consistency. Even his best friend will not love him because of his consistency. I'm sure Salman Saab, if you had sent him there, would have told him, look, this is the alternative. This is what you can. Salman Saab, why don't you bite the bullet and say what you should be saying rather than hiding behind a veneer of Congress posturing?
Well, this rhetoric about consulting the wishes of the people. Now, how would you have consulted the wishes of the people? Would you... No, leaders is neither here nor there.
No, not leaders. Have elections and have an assembly. You did not have elections, therefore you had president's rule.
No, we have had elections, we've had assemblies, and Kashmir has not been integrated with India. What have these mainstream politicians like Farooq Abdullah done to actually bring Jammu and Kashmir into the mainstream secular democracy of India? They haven't done anything. Have they done anything about the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits? Have they taken any steps to bring them back? So I would like to know, what is their contribution to national unity? Number two, I'm amazed that, this business about not having access to the internet is being now treated as a human rights issue. Who decides what are human rights issues? Is there some kind of an international consensus? There are huge parts of the world which don't have access to the internet, huge populations in Africa and elsewhere who don't have access to internet. In India, our percentage in terms of access to internet is maybe 40, 50, 60%, which means that day in and day out, year in, year out, we are committing human rights violations all across the world. I mean, let's not exaggerate this beyond a certain point. And secondly, as our External Affairs Minister said very wisely, that give me a solution where you can have access to the internet, but social media will not be abused to incite violence. This is a real issue that governments have to deal with.
On the issue of curbs, in the interest of curbs, when we're talking about restrictions, etc., we do forget that separatists for very long have called for curbs, boycotts. Children weren't allowed to go to school on days. Traders could go on for months. We didn't really complain then. That was supposed to be an expression of their aspiration. It's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? Yes.
I'm going to reiterate what I said in my opening remarks. My only concern is the average normal Kashmiri on the ground. Because until he feels safe, he feels prosperous, he feels happy and integrated with India, you're not going to have this potential blowback blown out.
Which Kashmiri? The Kashmiri Hindu, the Leh Kashmiri, the
look,
Jammu
we're talking
Kashmiri?
about the valley. At the moment, look, there is no problem in Jammu, there is no problem in Leh. In fact, Leh is celebrating openly. So, because the fact is that, what Mr. Kamal Sibal said, that the valley is 98% Muslim and beset with a very, very troublesome neighbor on both sides. So there are two troublesome neighbors who are playing in troubled waters there, and there's no question. So therefore, the best way that this government can, in my opinion, move forward is you have the average artisan, you have the weaver, you have the carpet seller, you have the shawl weavers. They comprise, you have the apple growers. These are the people who are the nuts and bolts of what Kashmir is. They have to be helped in their daily lives. And if they feel that the central government is reaching out, and the central government has spent lakhs of crores, which has gone down the drain in Kashmir, the time has come perhaps now to start spending money wisely in Kashmir to enrich the normal average Kashmiri. If the normal average Kashmiri starts getting seriously enriched in terms of his day-to-day life, I believe he'll feel the government is giving him something for which he needs to respond and give back to the government. And I think that's very important. My only last problem on this is, unfortunately, this is a government, and everybody has said this, which relies so largely on the oratorical magic of the Prime Minister and the strong arm of the Home Minister. Apart from that, it's, with the greatest respect, fairly shorn of talent, and that's the problem. I think they're so over-reliant on the big two that they are not able to find the right people who are going to be working the nuts and bolts. So everything depends on the PM's magic, in front of a mic, or Amit Shahji's magic on his table when he's using some sort of strong arm tactics to ensure that people stay in line and within the law. Now, this is going to be a problem. You have to find the right people to act as interlocutors in Kashmir. That is missing, and I believe that's part of the problem.
Okay, since we have restricted this for the time being just to the valley, as Mr. Mishra says, I want to ask you, Mr. Khurshid, and this is a question that many people ask, even on the panels that I conduct. If there is, at least on the face of its security, an overwhelming presence, what stops people from going about their daily lives? Is it the fact that they wake up in the morning to posters outside their homes from the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Toiba that warn them against it? A Pakistani propaganda? Or is it really alienation?
Well, let me just first make explicit what Pinaki has implied, which is that this government lacks talent, and there is talent sitting here right next to us, and this government should include that talent. this government will look a lot better if you have people like Jay Panda in this government. Anyway, but and there's consultation with the people, they approve of it. There's consultation and people approve it.
Okay, okay. Let's not make this quarrelsome, sir.
We'll have you here next time. Now, the problem is that we are looking at Kashmir and the problem in Kashmir in very unreasonable, unnatural terms. First, we must accept there's a problem. Secondly, we must endeavor to show that we are all on the same side of the problem, that we all want to resolve that problem. And nobody here would, even in the wildest imagination, hope and expect that Kashmir finds a solution of its own, apart from what the aspirations of all of India is. So let's be very clear on that. Now, as far as it's preferred to take away your voice than to take away your life, obviously, that makes sense. But to be the living dead is no better than to be dead. So you can't make such comparisons that, look, take away their voice because otherwise they will die. We are, as Mattu Saab said, we are living in a civilized country. We are living in a strong, robust democracy, and we cannot make easy exceptions by simply saying, this is national security, you will get nothing. In national security, then shut down everything in the whole country. You can't do that. You have to know that there are reasonable restrictions that you can impose, but reasonable restrictions does not mean you take away rights entirely. And this I hope the Supreme Court will make clear. But at the end of the day, there is a sullenness, as I understand. Of course, there are people in Jammu and Kashmir who may have been potentially trouble creators, and therefore they were told you stay inside your home, so that we are locking you up. But they were very sensible, reasonable, rational people who were traveling to Jammu and Kashmir to try and help out. Why were they sent back from the airport? What was the reason why someone who's been finance minister of this country or foreign minister of this country had to come back from the airport? Why did other senior leaders have to come back from the airport? I think it's completely unacceptable. But lastly, there is a sullenness, I believe. There's a sullenness by which people are keeping them away from absent yourself from a felicity a while, etc. attitude. There is a sullenness, they don't understand what's happened to them. And they're reacting in a manner which is probably adverse to their own interest by not even going and doing the normal things. There may not be curfew, but people have a self-imposed curfew by saying, this is the way we protest. Now that's an unnatural thing for our country. It's a horrible thing for our country. We need to put Kashmir right as quickly as we can, because the future can be terrible unless we put Kashmir right.
Okay, well, I'm part Kashmiri Hindu, and I find this quite a strange narrative, actually, because when there have been attacks on certain minorities in this state, they were never represented. The Human Rights Commission was never there in Kashmir. It is there now. Think about that. I just want to hand you on to respond to Mr. Khurshid on the restrictions and the curbs and the living hell that is being created.
First, Salman, a backhanded thank you to you for playing an old favorite song called Killing Me Softly. To come back to your original question about markets functioning, I think anybody who's interested can find out that the markets are often open at night. They are, several traders and shopkeepers have been killed by terrorists. And please don't call them militants. They are terrorists. And as a result, whoever dares to open their shops in the morning is threatened, not just by posters, but by bullets. There is normalcy in terms of traffic moving, schools opening, now phones working, many other things. People are able to come, as Pinaki said, from Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh to visit Delhi and other parts of India, and people from India are able to visit. Please try, you can go there tomorrow. There is no restriction. The restriction is on certain political activity. In answer to what Salman was saying, because the situation is gradually returning to normal, until it is normal, this is not the right time to have political activity. But there will be political activity. I mentioned a little bit earlier about a whole new generation of 25,000 directly elected people from panchayats, and now they have elected block development council chairpersons. You asked about money. Do you know that in 70 years, the per capita expenditure in Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh was 4 times the per capita expenditure for rest of India. 4 times what the government of India spent on every person in the rest of India. If they spent 100 rupees on me and you, they spent 400 rupees on every person in Jammu. Where is the infrastructure? Where are the industries? Where are the jobs? Now, the funding is going to go directly to the block development councils for starting immediately. It's going to reach the districts, it's going to reach the blocks. That's going to make a very big difference. As full normalcy returns, the full political process will return. 2 last quick points. Our political leaders there are not able to move around without state-provided security. That is how normal the situation was and continues to be for them. Even today, they will find it difficult, I think Amitabh will confirm this, that the Jammu and Kashmir, particularly the valley politicians, will not be able to move around. That's not normal. Let full normalcy be there, they will be allowed to move around. And finally, thank you, Sibyl Saab, for pointing out the issue of the Pandits, because when lakhs of them were ethnically cleansed from the valley, when at least hundreds, perhaps thousands of them were killed by terrorists, where was this outrage?
I agree with what Jay Panda Saab is saying, that security is an issue for the average politician. Has been so for most of the 72 years since independence. But the question really to Sibyl Saab and his mandarins in the foreign services, that you have to take for granted that you have a troublesome, troubled neighbor who is going to disrupt everything that you try and do to improve the conditions of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. What have you done about it for 72 years? Militarily, diplomatically, has Pakistan changed? Has its ability to intrude, intervene, and create a new narrative in Jammu and Kashmir changed? No. So you have to assume that that is a given. Secondly, Jai, this is another backhanded compliment, not to you, but to your former ally. The one person who took up the cause of the Kashmiri Pandits, first person, and gave them reservation for seats in Maharashtra was Thackeray Saab of the Shiv Sena. He began a trend which others started following, but Bala Saheb Thackeray was the first to recognize the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits. So hopefully you will recognize the contribution of the Shiv Sena leadership then.
We still don't have a problem with Bala Saheb's legacy. Our problem is with something else.
Last few words before we wrap up and throw it to the audience.
Just a quick point. I had said that mistakes have been made, and we want to go on record to say that the en masse and forced expulsion of the Hindus from Jammu Kashmir was highly condemnable. And no government, either in the state or the center, intervened strongly enough to protect their rights. And therefore, there should be no appeasement or one-sidedness in terms of policy making or dealing with people. But I want to say again, and I hold my head high as I say it, that in the world's largest democracy, let us not adopt the lowest common denominator of what is normalcy. Let us not compare our own state with Xinjiang and with Islamabad and with China and what they do there, and to derive satisfaction from the fact that we are not as bad as they are. We are the world's largest democracy. The people of Jammu Kashmir are not lifeless statistics. They are human beings who are citizens of our country. There may have been mistakes in the past, but we have got to once again have a roadmap, Jay, a roadmap which goes beyond merely the attempt to prove normalcy, a roadmap that reaches out to the hearts and minds of all citizens of India. Only then can we give a fitting riposte to the machinations of Pakistan.
Okay, last comment.
Yeah, very briefly. Secondly, firstly, you said that you talked about Pakistan, and the point is Pakistan will be what it is, as you said. But if Pakistan has been successful in the last 72 years, and has managed to secure enough foothold in Jammu and Kashmir in their minds and in their politics to continue to create problems for us. I think it says a lot about the Kashmiri Muslims in the valley. I mean, bear this in mind. If they were really committed to India, they could have easily resisted this kind of Islamization, radicalization, separatism, and everything else. Why didn't they resist it?
Let's not demonize.
No, it's not a question of it's not a question of demonization.
You know,
It's
suddenly
looking
they
at
have
things-
become very bad.
It looks
Till
well.
yesterday you had a
Look,
government
well,
there.
gentlemen,
Point is,
Gentlemen, look.
rhetoric is fine, political rhetoric is fine, but we have to live in a real world. Simply patting ourselves on the back, we are the
Real
biggest
world doesn't
democracy in the
exclude
world.
your own citizens.
Biggest
Well, there have
democracy
been,
in the
of
world.
course, Kashmiri Muslims who have
And then
laid down their lives for this country.
advocate unrealistic solutions.
But there is also a problem,
Is not
and I do
practical.
agree with you,
Is not practical.
Mr. Sibal, to some extent. There is a problem, and we have to look at it in the face. If you're talking about the roadmap and the solutions, we also have to ask ourselves, is that roadmap going to go through a Wahhabi mosque? And that's the question that we have to ask us. I think we've forgotten that the nature of the grievance there is changed today. And we have to live with that. We have to deal with it. We're closing the floor. Thank you for your patience. You've been a wonderful audience. Short questions so that we can take a lot more. Thank you. The lady there.
I wanted to ask you about the issue of Kashmiri Muslims, Kashmiri Pandits, sorry. Why is it that that issue is only brought up when we're talking about Kashmiri Muslims? And why is it used to dismiss the experience of Kashmiri Muslims? Why does no one talk about it? Why did no one talk about it before this happened?
Who's the question for?
Whoever wants to answer.
Okay. Would anyone like to? Why is it that the issue of Kashmiri Hindus only comes up
Not talked out before.
before
No,
and
I
only
think,
comes up with reference to Kashmiri Muslims?
Yeah, no, I think it needs to be dealt with independently because of the tragedy of the Kashmiri Pandits. And the exodus is something which is unprecedented in India's history. They've lost a whole sense of community, a sense of belonging. There are very few left. So I agree with you. I think it doesn't have to be clubbed with the situation that obtains in the valley today. I think the tragedy and the huge exodus that existed or of the Kashmiri Pandits needs to be dealt completely differently, empathetically, and in terms of policy.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is a wonderful thing. So thank you very much for conducting this beautiful debate. I was in the room in 2003 at the HT Executive Summit when Benazir Bhutto, for the first time ever, conceded in an interview with Veer Sanghvi that while we started this low-level insurgency in Kashmir because it was sort of, they considered it beneficial to them. The second thing I remember from that event was, and that was 16 years ago, a young Omar Abdullah went on stage and he said, well, why we don't want to have anything to do with what our forefathers did. Why can't we just suspend politics for 10 years and let economy flourish and there'll be prosperity and everything? So that didn't work, you know. So I'm just wanting to ask everybody, what would be your vision if 10 to 15 years from now, Kashmir is prosperous and healthy, like all of you talked?
Okay,
what would
what's
be
the road
your
ahead, in
end
short?
scenario?
Anyone
Everybody.
wants to take that question?
Everybody, yeah.
I think it's a good question.
Thank you.
First, I think we should not talk in terms of black and white. The honest answer would be that in the last 3.5 months, gradually, step by step, normalcy is returning. I gave you all the examples about the landlines, the cell phones, the traffic moving, people allowed to go to Jammu and Kashmir and come out of there from here. There's no such restriction. Only about 10 police chowkis have any kind of restrictions. There's no general curfew, there's no general 144. But it's not full normalcy, it will take some more time. The political process has already started 2 years ago with the first ever Panchayat elections and now the first ever Block Development Council chairperson elections. As I was just talking about fiscal devolution that has started for the first time in more than 70 years in Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh. Now, the road forward is that full normalcy has to be resumed in the political space, and that will take a little bit of time. We've had 70 years of abnormality. And, you know, a few months to return to normalcy is not, I think, that hard to accept. what I'm saying is this. We have had a situation for several decades where in the political process, people used to straddle partly a commitment to the constitution when they were in Delhi or when they were in Jammu. But in the valley and abroad, many of the same people spoke in the language of soft separatism. That has to change. The commitment to the Constitution of India has to be full. It can't be partial. It can't be 99%. The commitment to the Constitution of India has to be full, and that's the basis on which political activity will resume. The Prime Minister has pointed out that nothing stops the process of Jammu and Kashmir going back to again being a state. Being a union territory for the time being, Amitabh, serves one important purpose: much greater coordination between union forces and state forces in tackling terrorism. But there's no bar on it to go back to being a full state in the future.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Sibal. In the last 10 years, we have seen rest of India, other than Kashmir, move towards the Hindu right. Do you think this helps to create a secular dispensation in the valley? And if so, how soon do you think that this will help the Kashmiri Pandits to get back safe and sound into the valley?
Well, I think you would have to ask yourself the question. You will have to ask yourself the question, when has there been a secular atmosphere in the valley? There never has been. And then to now say that because India as a whole, as you say, is moving towards Hindu rights, so that gives some kind of a reason for the people in Jammu and Kashmir or in the Kashmir Valley to feel alienated. I think we've had a problem with them right from the time of our partition. So it's nothing new. At that time, BJP was nowhere on the scene. It's only in the last few years that the BJP has emerged as a political force and they are governing India. So I don't think that excuse can be used by the people in the valley to say that, they are alienated or more alienated and it'll be difficult to integrate themselves with the mainstream India. I think if the Kashmiri leadership, whichever emerges, realizes that their future is with the Indian democracy, and then I think a solution can be found. But so long as there's external interference, so long as they still have dreams of creating some kind of an Islamic enclave within India by force of the fact that they are in an overwhelming majority in the valley, we'll continue to have difficulties. But let me make a point, which is that name one country in the world, virtually, which doesn't have problems. When one problem gets resolved, other problems crop up.
Sweden.
So to imagine that, if tomorrow we are able to stabilize the situation in Jammu and Kashmir in a larger sense, there will be no problem. There will be problems. It will be an ongoing struggle in order to govern Jammu and Kashmir as well as the rest of India. So India is a very, very difficult country to govern. So let's not focus on our mistakes in Kashmir. We are committing a lot of mistakes elsewhere in the country too.
Okay.
And we have to put our house in order constantly.
May I request the panelists and anchor, sir, please let such a huge audience be represented by 2-3 people who have now, I suppose, heard quite a lot of rich material. Let us project 1 or 2 points. Unless you are not in a hurry. I can sit here till evening.
Well, we've just got 5 minutes. The organizers
Can you
have
give
given
me
us.
a minute and a half?
Please go ahead, but a question.
Yeah, I have just returned from the valley. I was living there.
Yes.
I came specifically for this to ask a question.
Wonderful.
Now, number 2, I can ask one question which could be answered at their homes. Why did Mahatma Gandhi see a ray of light only and only in Kashmir? I was 6 years old then. I saw him next to my house in Sheetalnath. None of you will be able to answer it. There was something in Kashmir implanted by Article 370, and that was magnetism between Hindus and Muslims of that place. If anybody threw out the Kashmiri Pandits, it was by design. The Congress party.
Okay.
If they could, I'm not a politician, I have never been in politics. If they could stop, present government could stop 70 lakh of people. I was there, right there in Humhama. That is 2 kilometers from airport. I starved for 3 days. And like they are starving for internet now, I starved for food then. Congress party could have stopped. 3 lakh Pandits could have been given accommodation in all the vacant cantonments. I'm very familiar with the cantonments. I commanded at least 69 of them for 3 years. They were nicely provided, what do you say there? You provide them a path to live. And they suffered. They suffered miserably.
We empathize with your pain, sir. I think Mr. Mattu wants to respond to you.
I have not asked you the 1 or 2 more important, but give them internet for God's sake. Children are suffering. Young people are suffering.
Okay.
Give them restricted internet.
Sure.
And schools are suffering. Thank you very much, Mr. Anchor.
The reason why Mahatma Gandhi found a beacon of light, of hope in Jammu and Kashmir is because he recognized that Jammu and Kashmir was the finest expression of the idea of India, complete harmony, communal harmony, regional harmony, harmony on the basis of all different diversities, existing together, celebrating that diversity. I am confident. I have a belief in that idea of India, and I believe that that beacon of hope, that sustenance will still come from Jammu and Kashmir. This too will pass, and Jammu and Kashmir will once again be that crowning glory of the
Mr.
idea of
Mattu,
India.
India is a beacon of hope. It's not just Kashmir. All of us live together, all faiths, with great equanimity, love.
This is apropos
And
what
that is the
Mahatma
beauty
Gandhi said.
of the subcontinent.
Rahul,
So,
Mr. Anchor, two Kashmiri Pandits. Two Kashmiri Pandits have given you vote for this. Kashmiri Pandits.
Yes.
We are not Muslims.
Yes.
And we are telling you there was absolute harmony there. The disharmony was induced only by Pakistan, and only by Pakistan.
Since we are remembering Gandhiji, I just want to, on behalf of both Jay and myself, indeed all the panelists, just remind the audience the contribution of late Biju Patnaik in saving Kashmir, in saving Srinagar, when the marauders and these raiders of Pakistan had virtually reached Srinagar. He's the one who flew in sortie after sortie and dropped our Indian soldiers into Srinagar in very, very hostile conditions. And really, we must salute that man, because if Srinagar had been taken over, there would have been very serious problems. And that's how our soldiers managed to run these raiders back into now what is POK, and of course we should have thrown them right back into Pakistan. That wasn't done. That's another story.
on that
But
wonderful
just
note,
hats off to Biju Patnaik.
wonderful anecdote. Thank you very much. I'm really run out of time. You've been a very patient and lovely audience. Stay with us as we take you through other important events through the day. Thank you very much. Thank you.